I do want to shift gears and talk about your book, which followed couples that kept diaries of their sex lives. And you really found a lot of interesting things there about how people have, how people who are married for years can still have vital sex lives, and how some couples just stop having sex and women completely go off sex. So tell us what you found doing this research, writing this book, reading all of these sex diaries of all of these different couples. What did you find was the general trend of what sex looks like after marriage?
Quite surprisingly, what came through was a very grim picture for men, a cry of anguish. And that was fascinating to people because so often men don't talk about what it's like to spend their marriages begging for sex, hoping sex will be doled out to them like little meaty treats to a dog, this idea that they have to really behave themselves to have any hope of getting it, is really humiliating for me. And they poured their hearts out to me. I had this fascinating situation because I got couples to write a his and her diary, if you like. They weren't writing about what they do in bed. They were writing about how they get there. So on any one day, I had to give a record of, did anyone try to initiate sex? If so, how did the other person react? Were they rejected? So how did they feel about that? And then I'd get his and her version of that night. So every morning I'd leave out of bed to see what happened last night. It was just, they were all just pouring into me this. Oh, fascinating. But as I said, as I absolutely expected, this message of the sex-starved man was the resounding message that came through for that book. And I've, of course, been hearing this most of my life. When I was a sex therapist as a young woman, that's what I heard most about. And you heard it from both sides. You heard it from the women saying, I've gone off sex. I'm not remotely interested. I know he's really upset about it, but it's the last thing on my mind, particularly from the young mothers, women who have children crawling all over them all day. Very rare that they maintain their sex life through that enormous upheaval in their family life. So the sex-starved men was the major issue. I had 1 in 10 was the other way around, the sex-starved woman, and they were absolutely fascinating.
Tell us what you found there.
Well, they were very cross, very cranky lot.
I bet.
That was the amazing thing to me about the men, is the men were so resilient. Men who would put themselves up, those little doll clowns in a fun fair, where you throw the ball and you knock them out. I think men are rather like, and they'd pop up and have another go and get them again. There's a constant willingness to put themselves up and be rejected again and again, but just in the hope of that intimacy. Now, I say that intimacy because women assume it's just sex. For goodness sake, go run around the oval or have a cold shower. They don't see it as a big deal. And men wrote so beautifully about that. The fact that it's not. They know they can go and masturbate. Any man can masturbate. It's not about getting their rocks off and getting sexual relief. It's sex gives them that connection to their partner in a way that nothing else does. And it was part of their expectation of a loving marital relationship, or even if it's just a long-term live-in relationship, they expect to have a lover. And to find themselves living with a roommate or a sister is just heartbreaking for them and really deeply humiliating. So that's the male resilience. But what I found with the women, they were absolutely shocked to find themselves rejected. And many women would be rejected a couple of times. They wouldn't go near the husband again. And they just couldn't cope with the idea of coming on to him and having him reject them.
I can understand that though, because of, the differences between men and women's sex drives. Men usually on average have a higher sex drive, and they maintain it over time, throughout their life.
Yeah.
And women have a lower relative sex drive. Maybe it's a little higher, when they're single and they're, looking for a partner, and then
Yeah.
during that kind of falling in love period. But then once kids come and hormonal changes happen and all sorts of things, then women do lose their sex drive on average, not all.
No.
But I think that the reverse of that, when a woman still has her sex drive and the man doesn't, I think that would probably just, shock a woman and
Yeah.
feel very personal almost, like, are you not attracted to
Rejecting
me?
me, doesn't like my body, all that stuff. Women have.
Right, because we don't talk about, the dynamics in sex. A man wants to feel powerful, vital, able to satisfy, but a woman wants to be attractive. She wants to
Yeah.
feel like he wants her. She wants to feel wanted. She wants to feel like she's beautiful at whatever age, You want to feel that he desires you. That magic is still alive. And I really, hearing about all of these couples who weren't having sex anymore, whether it was the man or the woman, I think you really lose, first of all, a source of connection within the relationship that is, it's hard to replace, because it's hard to explain what sex is. Sex is a very animal, natural thing. It's our intersection between culture and nature, as some have put it. But I think that it really, at the end of the day, when you look at couples who are having sex and those that aren't, the ones who are having sex, they keep this magic alive. They keep this sense of vitality and this almost youthful energy, and a real true desire for one another, and a playfulness. Because when you've, been together for so long, I'm sure that um, you need to experiment. You need to play. You need to explore. You need to be open to something new. And I think you can probably, reach a knowledge of one another and an intimacy that's unparalleled if it's, outside of a committed relationship. So I think people lose a lot of potential for magic there.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I should say, I think there are couples who have, just subside into a pretty non-sexual relationship quite happily.
right.
And when it's mutual,
Okay.
I think that that's fine. The problem is when there's a disparity in desire and
I
one person's
understand.
feeling rejected. If you both rather eat chocolate or watch a good movie or read whatever,
Those
it's just,
couples that are both okay with not having sex,
mm,
what ages have you found does that scenario usually happen? Is it after a certain point where both partners are okay, or does it not matter? Does age not
well,
matter?
we had this, you mentioned the gap in desire. And I mean, it's really interesting research showing that gap is increasing between male and female sexual interest. And unfortunately, women are more likely than they used to go off sex, and they're doing it earlier than they used to. I mean, I think there are really interesting cultural factors here.
What do you think is driving that?
I think we're sending such a strong message to women that they don't have to, they don't want to. It's all contingent on whether they feel like it. And there can't be any obligation. You should never take one for the team. You should never have sex for any other reason than your own desire.
Now, the reason I'm sharing this is it's a wonderful example of how I've come to trust my knowing. You could call it Holy Spirit, intuition, but I just call it knowing. I just know things just because I just know how human beings actually operate and how ideologies operate and just how things work. I just understand how things work. So I know things. And I got into a big argument with the lovely, delightful Millie, one of our first arguments, when I shared that video from Karen Seitz of the Happy Wife School, who was saying, why do women stop having sex with their husbands? And she basically said, because we married for the wrong reasons. We marry for the reasons that we expect our husband to make us happy. And when he doesn't, we punish him for not making us happy, even though he can't, by not having sex with him. And Millie didn't like that, and she used an example. At the time, I was still in the early stages of demonstrating that feminism has been terrible for women. And she pushed back by pointing out she had a friend who was sex-starved by her boyfriend or husband. So sometimes women don't get enough sex. Like, she thought that was an argument at the time. And I know you've come a long way since then, Millie, but I pointed out that women tend to do that. You use the exception to try to disprove the rule. And in this, the wonderful Bettina aunt pointed out that of all these sex diaries that these people were sending her, 1 in 10, the woman wasn't getting enough sex. 9 out of 10, it was the man. So that was the point I made to Millie. I just knew that's the case. I just know that's the case. I've talked to enough men and women and known enough men and women to know that it's the vast majority of the time the woman stops, the man isn't getting enough sex and the woman's not giving it up. And I also have known, and I had a knockdown, drag out discussion, difference of opinion with a woman on The Only Way Out Is In a while back when I posted a similar video. And she was furious at the very idea that when you get married as a woman, you have wifely duties. You have an obligation to give your man sex. Like, when I grew up, this was obvious, but obviously feminism has completely changed everything. And, I was trying to say to her was that you got married and your husband, you expect certain things from him and he expects certain things from you. Wifely duties, husbandly duties, whatever they may be in your marriage, taking out the garbage, doing the washing up, doing the laundry, doing the gardening, doing the handiwork, going to work. A lot of people, both couples work nowadays, so it's not so much as it used to be. But there's a share, there's an agreement and a shared responsibility. The woman has needs. A woman needs to feel validated and have attention and have emotional support. And a woman and a man need sex. In fact, women tend to have a lot more needs than men, and a lot of subtle, not easy to read needs than men. Men pretty much only have 2 needs. Please give me some peace, don't talk to me all the time, and please give me some sex. Yeah, that's from time immemorial. It's so obvious, but because we live in a female supremacist society that has propagandized this message that women are superior to men, and it's only women's needs and women's wants and women's suffering that matters, that has value. Men's needs, men's wants, and men's suffering doesn't matter because we've lived under a patriarchy and men are bad and now it's women's turn. That's the feminist message. It basically says men don't matter anymore. We have to put women first, second and third, and men last. That culture obviously is completely anti-love. It's anti the way, it's anti-unity, it's anti-equality, it's supremacist. It's like nobody believes that white supremacy is okay, but almost everybody believes that female supremacy is okay. It's absolutely bananas. Anyway, so I find myself having these arguments about things which are insane. There is no justification as a wife for not, regularly sexually pleasing your husband. If you are ill or you have ill health and what have you, okay, fair enough. Obviously, health issues aside, there is no justification, or if he's abusive. Obviously, take out the ones where the man is not a good man or the woman is literally unwell. So if the woman is well and he's a good husband, there is no justification for not giving him sexual pleasure regularly. None at all. Because that's why he married you. And that's why he married you. You used sex to get him. All women do that. You gave him great sex. You let him have access to your body, which he wants. And you basically reeled him in. You said, okay, well, you can keep having sex with this body if you will put a ring on my finger and give me a lovely wedding and support me in these ways and give me children and then go out to work, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's a deal. It's a transaction. We don't exist in holy relationship in our world. Holy relationship, Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, is a completely different thing. I'm not talking about that. That's the only thing I'm interested in. But most people are interested in a relationship, which is a transaction. You meet my needs and wants, and I'll meet yours. Yeah, that's basically how human relationships are. They're transactions. And feminism has made it possible for women to say, you meet my needs and wants, and I fuck yours. Basically, yours don't matter. That's basically what has happened to relationships. And I love Bettina Arndt because she's one of those rare women like Karen Seitz, and she really pisses off women like Karen Seitz pissed off Millie, and like I pissed off this other, by just saying it straight, just saying the obvious truth. That the reason that women stop having sex is because they're selfish and they only value what they want to need, and they don't value their husbands' wants and needs because men are inferior to women and their needs don't matter, because female supremacy, because feminism. And she says it just there. When the woman asked her, I just love being validated in my knowing by female researchers. So it's not a man saying this is a woman, a mother, a researcher, a sex therapist. So she couldn't be more womanly and feminine. But she's saying exactly what I've always known based on research and data and being a sex therapist, which is our culture, women are more likely to stop having sex earlier now than they ever have before. And when she asked her why, because the culture tells women men's needs don't matter. Only your needs matter. What you feel like is the only thing that matters. That is literally infantilizing women. Like I always say, we treat women like babies. Like if you have a tantrum, it's justified. If you feel upset or offended, it's justified. If you feel like not having sex with your husband because you're in a bad mood, it's justified. We just justify everything women feel because we've pedestalized women and we've demonized and denigrated men. Men don't matter. Men have no value. And she just nailed it. She absolutely nailed it. And she's actually going to go on to say the second thing that I say, but I'll let her say that first.
And I think that's crazy because, I mean, in fact, there was some really interesting research years ago by a Canadian professor who was working for years with women who had no sexual interest at all. And she found there were situations for many of these women where they could experience sexual pleasure even though they had no desire. I always talk about if you put the canoe in the water and start paddling, and you have to have a willingness to be receptive. So if you think, oh, this is not going to work for me, I'm not interested, I hate this, obviously it's not going to work. But if you think, oh, I know once I get over this initial feeling, I don't feel like it, if he's doing all the right things for me, so he has to know how to make love to her. And then desire kicks in later. And that was the interesting thing. You don't need desire at the beginning. It can kick in later. We didn't know that when I was taught 50 years ago. We thought you had to have desire for a woman to reach orgasm. That's simply not true. And I haven't met many women who know that if they can get their head in the right place and, work on turning themselves on in the sense of preparing, at breakfast time, go and have a massage, do little things that make them more relaxed, that make them start anticipating sex, send him little sexy messages, flirt. They deliberately work on getting in the right place because they want sex to remain part of their relationship. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, women who say, if I'm not interested, it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. And that is the most, the growing scenario in marriages today. Women having decided, I'm not interested, and sex just is off the agenda. I've heard from men who've gone for 20 years with no sex in their marriage. Absolutely hard. Not even, and of course what happens is, if you're not interested in sex, you often don't let him near you. You won't let him give you a cuddle because you think, oh God, he'll plague me then,
Wow.
You push him away, and what that's like for men to sleep next to a woman that they still desire night after night and never be even allowed to look at her. I mean, it's absolutely tragic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the point that you made about sex drives and sexual desire. Most women don't realize that there's a difference between spontaneous desire and responsive desire. And I think that's what you're talking about, the
Yeah.
fact that women at a certain point, you might feel less spontaneous desire. You might experience less moments where you think to yourself, oh, I'm horny. That might happen less. That responsive desire, on the other hand, if you get started, things happen, your body responds, and then that desire does wake up. So that kind of motto of just do it in this situation, I'm sure a lot of angry feminists are going to hate us for saying this. But there's good that comes from that. You can enjoy yourself if you open yourself up to the responsive desire.
It's totally not done to talk about any sense of obligation to your partner's sexual life. And, that's part of this whole cultural story.
About that, I'm very interested in this. I'm very interested in this because we don't like to talk about contractual obligations anymore, and the fact that marriage is a contract, and you make vows and you commit to life. This is a big endeavor. But you are committing to being this person's world, and they're your world. And the fact that we have forgotten that we have true responsibility towards one another, and the fact that if you want a marriage to succeed, and a lot of talk of polyamory and open relationships, and maybe monogamy isn't natural for humans, and all of this nonsense. If you want monogamy to work, if you want marriage to work, there are certain ingredients that it needs, to flourish. And the fact that we don't talk about these obligations because it sounds, old and stuffy, or it sounds like we're telling women that they need to, surrender to their man whenever he wants. And that's not the case at all. And we're not talking about distributing women to men to have sex with them. This is your husband that you picked, that you courted each other, and you went through the dating process, and you moved in together, and you got engaged, and you got married, and you had children, and this is your person. I'm not forcing you to associate with anyone that you don't want to here.
How many women talk about, this is what I want, and this is what I need for my marriage. Ask men what's missing from their marriages. The major factor would be more sex. That's what's missing from most marriages. And yet we're not even allowed to discuss that obligation to a man's sexual life, his sexual drive. And it's so weird the way we isolate out sex from everything else. We cook meatballs for him, even though we don't like meatballs, but we think, okay, and everything else is okay, and you're not allowed to give a man sexual pleasure just to, for the sake of the marriage. That's not on. But I don't think you always have to have intercourse. There are other ways of, keeping a sexual relationship alive. I don't think and if you're getting involved in sexual interaction and it's not working for you, give him pleasure. And it's not about buying him off. It's just about wanting to show him you care about him.
And I think, if you reverse this, if we reverse this into a language that, women can resonate with, if your man doesn't show you any emotional support, any emotional intimacy, doesn't show you love and affection, you will become starved for that affection. You will become starved for someone who loves you and, shows you with words of affirmation, or, with hugs, or whatever it is. But if the woman doesn't get that, she becomes starved, for that emotional security. And men need sex more. And yeah. And I'm always surprised by women who think that, if they go off sex, that's just okay. like the marriage can continue and everything will be fine. I don't know how they're not absolutely terrified of the consequences, because, you know, some men will cheat, some men will go into porn, some men will just resent you, you know, and be bitchy to you because they don't understand why, you know, you're not showing them that love and affection anymore. And I think that we also take power away from women here in this paradoxical sense, right? But the fact that men have a high sex drive means that women have power, you know, and we don't talk about that. But the fact that, you know, you are the gatekeeper and that you can make him feel good, you can make him feel like a man, you can make him satisfied. Don't you want to, you know, say goodbye to your husband in the beginning of the day when he goes out to the world and know that he is walking tall, satisfied man, you know, not looking at, you know, pretty young things as he's like walking through the world. Doesn't that sound like a better deal? I'm always surprised by the rhetoric around this, and no one's
and the fact
forcing you.
And they're really irate at the idea that he might stray from the marriage, even in that circumstance. It's just extraordinary to me.
After 20 years of no sex, I don't know which man wouldn't, right?
Oh,
and that's putting him, and that's putting a man in a situation where, God, you know, that's an impossible situation.
They write to me all the time in that situation. And most men don't want to have affairs. Most men, particularly men with children, are terrified of the marriage breaking up. They're terrified of losing their children. I used to have a chat thing on my, I don't know what it was, Facebook or whatever I had at the time. And there was this, and I got people to write letters and comment on each other's letters. And a man wrote this tragic letter saying, should I stay or should I go? And he hadn't had sex for years and years. And he had children. And it was precisely that dilemma. Should I risk losing my family, or do I stay in a marriage where not only is there no sex, there's no intimacy whatsoever? And it was incredible reading all the other men's react. I mean, the great divide between people who had left perhaps a marriage like that and found that was worth it. Others who would never give up their children. I mean, think of that powerful situation. Men will lose an essential part of what it is to be a man, because they're so afraid of the woman walking out on them and taking the kids. I mean, whoa, what have we done to men? I tell you something really funny. My book was published, you know, in about 15 countries, and including Argentina. And I got this phone call from an Argentinian journalist saying, "Can't believe these Australian men." She said, "No way would a man in Argentina, if he was, you know, presented with a situation where she wasn't giving them any sex, wouldn't stay for one, you know, he'd be off, he'd be having affairs, right, whatever." And they just thought Australian men were in deep trouble in the way that women are walking all over them. Of course, America's exactly the same.
Yeah, America is the same.
And this is what I mean by, prior to feminism, women understood their wifely duties. They used to say, lay back and think of England. But, you know, and we're not talking about, again, if you're absolutely exhausted or you're really not feeling well, that you have to have sex with your husband whenever he wants it. If he's a husband that expects you to have sex every time he wants it, then he's not a good husband. Most husbands are loving and they accept that, you know, you're not going to get sex every night, even though the man would probably want that. Most husbands are okay with twice a week, 3 times a week. So if in that context, a woman doesn't give her husband sex, and this is what we're talking about, sexless marriages, where it's been 6 months plus since they had sex. So we're talking about once or twice a year. When women are doing that, which is the most common form, this is what men are complaining about. So it's like, not like they're only getting it once a week. It's more like they're only getting it once a month. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. And as I say, that's pure selfishness. That's the woman deciding that her wants and needs have value and are important, but his wants and needs have no value and are not important. That's selfishness, that's supremacy, that is not loving in any way whatsoever. And as she pointed out there, the truth is that back in the day where there weren't, it's horrible to say this, but you couldn't be convicted of raping your wives. You know, those laws came in the 70s. And that was when men did force themselves on their women whenever they wanted to. And obviously that was wrong. But we as usual, we've swung the pendulum all the way to the other side. Whereas in the old days, a wife understood that men are sexual creatures, our sex drive is much higher than women. The only reason that we are going to want to basically live with a woman and be responsible for supporting a woman is because we get regular sex. No man would get married. I mean, it's so obvious and so simple. I can't believe I even have to say it, but no man would ever get married or have a girlfriend if he knew he'd get no sex. Okay, everybody knows that. I mean, it shouldn't be controversial. It's just that we don't want to acknowledge it because we want to be able to justify women doing whatever they want, including not having sex with their boyfriends and husbands. We just don't want to hold women accountable. Like I say, we've infantilized women and said, okay, whatever you feel is justified. You don't have to be responsible. You don't have to keep your vows. You don't have wifely duties. You don't have obligations. You don't have to surrender to the masculine. That's what feminism did. It said none of that. We're not having any of that shit. It's girl power, women first, men last. And so obvious things like no man would get married if he knew he wasn't going to have sex are unsayable for most people. Not for me though. Anyway, so she points out the research shows what wifely duties knew before feminism, which is if you allow yourself to say, okay, well, it's my husband, he works hard, he loves me, he's prepared to die for me and to protect me and our children. He's a good man. I know he's here because he wants sex. I'm going to give him some sex. It's simple as that. And, you know, if you've trained him to know your body and to know what turns you on, as she just pointed out, there's no reason you can't have great sex and have an orgasm. And everybody wins. But it requires you having some respect and love for your husband and not being and empathy and not being completely self-centered and thinking that only your feelings in the moment matter. Recognizing your husband has feelings, and if you keep rejecting him, you're going to crush him. You're going to crush him. You're going to destroy him. And that is the single issue. That's the main issue in relationships. It's either they say that, the main reason for divorce is financial reasons or sexless. Yeah. But because women file 80% of divorces, and they usually cite the reasons. And the reason they cite is I'm not happy. And the reason they're not happy are either he's not making enough money, so he's not paying for the lifestyle you want, and you think you can get better, or he doesn't turn you on. He turned you on enough as a beta provider. He was a good man to marry, to have kids, to look after you, but he's not a bad boy. He doesn't make you wet. And so you went off sex as soon as you had a couple of kids, and now the kids are a little bit older, and you want to go back out there and have exciting sex with the bad boys and the jads. Those are the two main reasons women get divorced. And it's, like I said, I've known this for years. It's obvious. But we're just not allowed to say it because we live in a gynocracy. We live in a female supremacist society where, as I think Rousseau said it, if you want to know who rules you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. And we are not allowed to criticize women, which shows that we live in a female supremacist society. Because the pushback on the sort of things I'm saying, if I said this on YouTube, the video would get banned. Because any criticism or obvious discussion of typical female behavior by modern women is seen as misogyny. Whereas literally saying men are toxic, men are shit, men are bad, men are terrible, it's all men's fault, is not called misandry. So literal misandry is not called misandry. It's just called, it's okay, it's fine, you can say it because men are shit. And non-misogyny, just pointing out female behavior, is called misogyny. Do you see? My favorite way of saying it is, don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. That is our whole culture. Our whole culture's attitude towards men. It pisses all over men by privileging and pedestalizing women at every turn, legally, economically, educationally, in the courts, everywhere. It pedestalizes and puts women first, and then it blames men for all of our problems. Everything's men's fault, even though men are the ones who are oppressed. Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. That is our culture. And it's perfect because our world is the creation of the dualistic ego. Our world is, compared to the real world of non-duality and unity, is hell. This is hell. And so this is the opposite of the kingdom. That's how Jeshua puts it. The world is the opposite of the kingdom. So in the kingdom, all are loved, lovable, and loved forever. Everyone is a radiant, holy child of God. Everyone is free and responsible and powerful and creative. So in the world, we have all these superiority, inferiority, inequality, power over, dominance, control, manipulation. And obviously, there are plenty of men that do it to women, and we talk about those, but we just don't talk about the women that do it to men and the societal element of it. But that is the way the world is, and I hope that by shining a light on the misandrist, female supremacist nature of society, I'm encouraging whoever's listening to this to relinquish the world, turn within, and pay attention to your own soul, your own perceptions, your own beliefs, your own thought systems, and embark on the way of mastery, the way of healing and awakening to your true nature and transcending the ego and transcending the world created by the ego. That's the reason I talk about these sort of things, because for most people, the reason people don't heal and awaken is because they're still attached to and identified with the false dream of the world will make me happy. I'll find happiness in relationships or success or status or money or accomplishment or fame or something in the world will give me peace, love and happiness. That is never going to happen because peace, happiness and fulfillment only come through paying attention to your own soul, to living the life that your soul wants to live, to living your heart's true desires, to learning what they are and then having the courage to live them. That's the only way anyone will ever find fulfillment. They'll never find it in the world. A man will never find it in a woman will never find it in a man. That's why I talk about it. If you're in a relationship, I'm not saying you shouldn't be in a relationship. What I'm saying is don't expect the relationship to fulfill you. Fulfill yourself by healing and awakening and mastering yourself. You can both do that while you're in a relationship. And if you're lucky and you do both do it, then you can experience holy relationship where each person has looked within and found no lack. That's the only way a relationship can be what it was always meant to be, what it's truly supposed to be, which is when neither person is using the other person to fill a hole in themselves. That transactional thing I talked about. Human relationships are transaction. You give me my needs, you fill my hole of lack, you fulfill me, you make me happy, and I'll do the same for you. That's human level relationships. And, most people are going to have those whatever I say. So I'm not saying don't have them. I'm just pointing out that that's what they are. And I'm also saying that if you are in a relationship and you want that relationship to work, The best chance of it working is for at least one of you to become one who's looked within and found no lack. One of you that's become a Christ, who can love the other one unconditionally. They'll probably leave you because it kind of takes two to tango. Both of you need to be in that codependent, you fill my holes and I'll fill yours. And I don't mean the obvious holes. I'm talking, psychologically and emotionally. It doesn't usually work when only one person is loving and the other person is still grasping and needing and trying to get. It doesn't usually work, but it's a whole lot better for the person who's, the Christ, because then they don't need a relationship to fill any holes because they filled it themselves. So they can be free in the relationship or out of the relationship. It doesn't make any difference to a Christ what the other person does. And as I said, if by some miracle your partner also embarks on the way and joins the only way out is in, because if you don't go within, you go without, and they also awaken, if they also grow and awaken to level 9 and 10, then you've hit pay dirt. Then you have holy relationship where you both celebrate the fact that only love is real. That non-duality means there is only God and you are both that. So it's God loving God's self, or it's God self loving God's self in celebration of God. It's love loving love in celebration of love. That is what relationship can be when you don't have two beings that feel lack and are trying to fill that lack from the world and other people. Until you reach that, your best bet is just to be honest. Just be honest. Just say, as a man, I'm with this woman because I want feminine companionship and sex. And as a woman, just be honest and say, I'm with this man because he makes me feel safe. He validates my emotions. He pays attention to me. He supports me financially, etc., etc. Whatever the reasons that you're together, they're fine. They're fine. Those are human reasons. You don't need to feel guilty or ashamed or anything like that. But be honest. Be honest. Don't pretend that you love each other, truly love each other. Because love asks for nothing in return. And you can't love unconditionally unless you're level 9 or 10. You just can't do it because you still need the world. You still feel lacking. You don't yet feel one with everything. You don't feel one with God. It's only then that you can give without asking for anything in return. So don't pretend to love unconditionally when you don't. And I'm saying that mainly to men because in the sort of manosphere, there's this understanding that women only love you for what you provide, whereas men love you for who you are. And whereas there is a truth in the difference, men aren't loving women unconditionally because if the woman sleeps with someone else, for example, you immediately fall out of love with her, right? Or if she doesn't give you sex for a year, you fall out of love with her. So you're not loving her unconditionally, but you are loving her for her as opposed to loving her for what she gives you, which is generally the way that women love. It is different, but neither is unconditional. I think that's something that a lot of men need to understand. Just because Chris Rock's joke, only women, children and dogs are loved unconditionally. No, they're not. Dogs maybe. Dogs, and maybe children when they're very young, are loved unconditionally. But neither men or women are loved unconditionally because men and women generally are not capable of unconditional love because they are still identified with their partial self, their separate self, their ego. And the ego, as I'm always pointing out, is a bottomless pit of lack, craving, clinging, fear and neediness. And that is never going to be able to love without wanting something in return. Whew, went into one there. Here endeth the lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments.